Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. There you go. Got the button pushed correctly. Good morning. It is Friday, July 28th, 2023, right? Still? Okay. Feels like we might have moved on into 2024 there accidentally, but no, we're still here. 2023. Let's see what was on Justice's mind this morning as he gives me the thumbs up that everything's working correctly. Let's see. Well, all right. I'm going to have to explore this one. He says, Elon's Twitter going dark is an apt metaphor. What has happened here? All right, I'll have to check into that. Did they change the, I don't know what. Well, we'll see if we can find out what that story is about. And he gave me a link to one of his own messages about that. Let's go and take a look here. Yeah, there we are. Elon Musk says Twitter will soon only offer dark mode because it's better in every way. Which, why give anyone a choice, right? That's what consumers really want to be dictated to. So I know there's a Twitter, you can display with a white background or the dark background, but I guess Elon, because he's a free speech absolutist and loves freedom, has decided to eliminate the light background. If you like that, you're wrong and stupid, and you're not allowed to have it anymore, I guess. Okay, that's interesting. What can I tell you? I guess we're all just waiting for the place to collapse, finally, and be done with it. But I guess it's going to take longer than we thought. Just everything takes longer than you thought. If you're rooting for something like that, you're going to have to wait a while. Like, I don't know, arresting and imprisoning Donald Trump, or one day burying Donald Trump, for instance. All the things that we're waiting for that are just going to take a longer time than we thought because reasons. We're not in control of everything. What was the other message? By the way, that too. Yes. Oh, yeah. Let's see. For years and years, they were saying Hillary Clinton bleached and acid washed her emails. Remember all those ridiculous claims? And of course, today we find ourselves on Superseding Indictment Boxing Day. We didn't even make Superseding Indictment Day because for whatever reason, and I got to tell you, it's at least indicative that Jack Smith is not that much of a publicity hound. That, he makes fabulous news dumps perfectly timed for the news cycle. I think it was like 9:30 last night, I guess, this news broke, and I didn't even notice it because we were out to dinner and afterwards, and, in checking in and preparing things for the morning, I saw, oh, hey, look at that. Everybody, all the newspapers emailing me their breaking news stories that there's been a superseding indictment, which means, of course, that this was not an indictment in the January 6th case, but rather additional work that had been done on, as it turns out in this case, the Mar-a-Lago sex dungeon document theft case. And this one brings out yet more information. I guess we were you had to be anticipating this eventually. Like, okay, if you had followed the case up until now, and I think you did, to some extent, right? You knew that he had stolen these documents from the White House. He had been accused of, incredibly enough that he could be indicted on it, or at least now he's being indicted on it, showing it to people or discussing it or saying, I have the document here. It's a secret plan for invading Iran. And then, of course, the sub-story about trying to blame that on General Milley for whatever reason. Et cetera, et cetera. But we learned along the way, of course, Trump has had his people at Mar-a-Lago moving the boxes around. They got a subpoena, searched the place for more stolen documents. Finally, they agreed to do that. But, of course, they cheat and move documents around and presumably attempt to hide some things that may still not yet have come to light. But then when the Justice Department lawyers show up to retrieve these things, they notice, hey, there's security cameras around where these documents have been stored. Let's subpoena the content, what's been taped by these security cameras. And we sort of come in late to the picture, learning about these things after the fact through these indictments. And they're able to say, well, we have these pictures of Trump aides moving these boxes around. That's pretty suspicious. And in fact, it actually, will be enough to indict them for colluding, really, in hiding the documents from the federal government. And you wonder, Trump's a criminal. Trump's crooked. He's of this sort of bent, right? Why didn't he order the security cameras removed and the footage destroyed? Well, the superseding indictment is all about just that. He didn't remove the cameras. It wasn't quite that obvious. But it seems from all of the electronic devices seized, it seems like there were texts going back and forth between top Trump aides. Trump never involved himself in this. He just gave the orders, I guess, verbally, thinking mob boss style. But texts back and forth that basically say the boss wants us to delete the surveillance video. So if you ever wondered, why didn't he just go and delete the surveillance video? He did try to do that. It's just that he's incompetent, and the people that work for him are particularly bad at this as well, I guess, which is terrific for all of us. I don't really know how difficult it actually is, but they tried everything from getting the IT guy to come in and erase the things, to contacting the head of the Trump Organization security apparatus, the Matthew Calamari, right? Remember him? And trying to get him involved in doing, I don't know what he would know about doing. He might be able to try to order people to do it, but I don't know if he would add any specific technical expertise. All the way down to apparently something I did notice when it happened and they reported it, but because they reported that no damage had been done, or they were claiming that no damage had been done to the servers, I didn't think very much about it, but it was pretty obvious and stupid that apparently a Mar-a-Lago maintenance worker drained the pool at Mar-a-Lago, which must have annoyed the Jeffrey Epstein types who usually troll the pool deck for towel girls, as they call them. And I mean, by the way, I think AI chatbots can hand out towels or handle the towel stuff at this point better than teenage girls. And there's no real reason to have live workers there if they're endangered by being put in the path of Jeffrey Epstein types. I don't think it's wise. Otherwise, I'm all for full employment. But anyway, somebody drained the pool, I don't know, in a way such that it happened to flood the server room, of all the rooms in Mar-a-Lago. And there are many useless and disgusting rooms that, honestly, they're painstakingly decorated, but you wouldn't notice necessarily that they were then flooded and filled with black slime, say. You would think that was part of the decor. But at any rate, of all the rooms in Mar-a-Lago that could have been flooded, it just happens that the pool drains into the server room. Right, exactly. That's the way everybody designs everything. But somehow, the claim was that the servers weren't damaged. But maybe the servers were damaged. They just said, oh, don't worry about it. They weren't damaged, but they may never have been damaged by the pool water, but they may have been sabotaged in some other way. Oh my gosh, I don't know how it happened. The pool did it, So we'll see. This is, it's pretty damning, the fact that they even had to do superseding indictments. So what are they up to, 40 counts now? And again, the real point here, and I think the thing that Justice was getting at was, yes, once again, for the 10 millionth time, every Republican accusation is a confession. She was bleaching her emails, acid washing the hard drives. They were dumping pool water on the servers, hoping to cover up the crime of them covering up the crime that they had committed. So, no news to you in that sense. As you know, we're big fans of the, number 32 NASCAR Trump Mustang because, we like to say when he's caught red-handed doing all of these things that, Trump Mustang. So he should, and, we'll see where this indictment goes. We can read the stories about it so we can get all of the, news organization takes on it. Let's see, The Hill emailed me about it, New York Times now getting on the ball and, emailing me things about this. Let's take a look at the New York Times one. based strictly on the headlines because the Times goes with the one you have to read first. Trump faces major new charges in documents case. The Hill, taking a different tack, ends up getting themselves read second because theirs is 5 revelations from the new Trump charges. They did a, hey, there are new Trump charges story, but then they emailed the 5 revelations. So we assume that they think that these are 5 things that you can distill from the flat news reportage, as perhaps the New York Times has done, that they have, that's added value. We'll see whether that's really the case. And if it's not, then everybody cancel your subscriptions to The Hill, right? All right. Maggie Haberman is in on this one, so look out. Also, Alan Feuer, who we read yesterday, and Glenn Thrush got his way into this one as well. Trump faces major new charges in documents case. Major new charges. Remember when he used to say every one of his speeches would be a major speech? Anyway, the Office of the Special Counsel accused the former president of seeking to delete security camera footage at Mar-a-Lago. You're wondering how long, why was it taking so long to announce that of course he was trying to erase security footage? He's not so much of an idiot that he doesn't think, oh, I could be in trouble here. We should see what we can do to fix it. But he is big enough of an idiot to actually try and do it and then not do it correctly. And then put people in a position that they're in trouble when they get their devices seized. I mean, really, there should be a general directive. I love how he reserves for himself as the boss the right to say, well, I'm going to give, verbal orders only and everybody else do the execution of it. But he might have considered at some point, please don't text any crime requests. Let's make sure that is done verbally. And I mean, they had a whole procedure and everything because the indictment lays out. We'll see whether these stories discuss it or not. I was reading Empty Wheels things. So if, you going to the 15th level of these things, here's what happened. Here's 5 takeaways. And then here's 50 pages on why, we know that Walt Nauta trims his toenails with his left hand. And so therefore we know this other important thing. It always leads to something important. It's just the granular level of detail that Marcy takes on. So this we know that they were texting these things, and we also know that apparently some of the discussions that they had face-to-face and not over electronic devices that leave a trail behind took place in the bushes just off the Mar-a-Lago property. Now, I don't know how long it takes to walk there from where they normally hang out. Maybe it's an easy thing. Maybe the property line abuts one side of the building. I don't know. But it makes it sound like they, it's a big property, right? It makes it sound like they take a long walk one to go into bushes. I don't really know why they go into bushes, but they're trying to go somewhere where no one else is, I guess, presumably to not be heard. I don't know if there's any significance to it being just off the property. That might be something too. It could be that's where the bushes are and it's no big deal. Or I could see it being something like Trump saying, I saw a movie once where they said, or he makes it up in his head because I don't think it matters in any way. Well, if they serve us a search warrant or if they ask us, did this ever take place at Mar-a-Lago? We can say, no, it didn't take place at Mar-a-Lago. We could just say no and leave it at that. Let them find out that it actually took place in the bushes 6 inches past the Mar-a-Lago property line. But we'll be telling the truth when we say it didn't happen at Mar-a-Lago. And I don't know whether it's anything, some stupid fantasy like that, or, they just like hanging out in the bushes. That's, that could be anything. Remember, Mar-a-Lago is a sex dungeon. I don't know why they're in the bushes, but they do. Maybe one day we'll find out. Okay. So, right. The New York Times. Yes, they were going to handle this responsibly. Remember? Quote unquote responsibly. But we don't want to affect the outcome of an election. Why would a newspaper want to help people decide on how they should lean in favoring their elected Democratic leaders, right? That would be crazy. Anyway, the Office of the Special Counsel accused the former president of seeking to delete security camera footage at Mar-a-Lago. The manager of the property, so a new name emerges in all this, Carlos de Oliveira, was also named as a new defendant. He was simply referred to in past documents as a Trump employee that helped with the moving of the documents, et cetera, et cetera. But now he's on the hook. All right, so what do they write here? Federal prosecutors on Thursday, they did it late at night, even though they made the jurors come in early in the morning. Federal prosecutors on Thursday added major accusations to an indictment charging former President Donald J. Trump with mishandling classified documents after he left office, presenting evidence that he told the property manager of Mar-a-Lago, his private club and sex dungeon and residence in Florida, that he wanted security camera footage there to be deleted. The new accusations were revealed in a superseding indictment that named the property manager, Carlos de Oliveira, as a new defendant in the case. He is scheduled to be arraigned in Miami on Monday. The original indictment filed last month in the Southern District of Florida accused Mr. Trump of violating the Espionage Act, yes, the Espionage Act, by illegally holding on to, in the case of what they're actually charging him with, 31 classified documents containing national defense information after he left office. It also charged Mr. Trump and Walt Naude, right, one of his personal aides, with a conspiracy to obstruct the government's repeated attempts to reclaim the classified material. The revised indictment added 3 serious charges against Mr. Trump: attempting to alter, destroy, mutilate, or conceal evidence, inducing someone else to do so, and a new count under the Espionage Act related to a classified national security document that he showed to visitors at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. That presumably is look at this. I got the Iran invasion plan here, and it was all because General Milley, what's his name, wanted to invade Iran. Not me, it was him. He wanted to do this thing. Proves me right, except it also proves that you were violating the Espionage Act. The updated indictment was released on the same day that Mr. Trump's lawyers met in Washington with prosecutors in the office of the special counsel, Jack Smith, to discuss a so-called target letter that Mr. Trump received this month, suggesting that he might soon face an indictment in a case related to his efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. It served as a powerful reminder that the documents investigation is ongoing and could continue to yield additional evidence, new counts, and even new defendants. Prosecutors under Mr. Smith, if that is his real name, had been investigating Mr. de Oliveira, if that's his real name, for months, concerned, among other things, by his communications with an information technology expert at Mar-a-Lago, Yusil Taveras. That's the IT guy who oversaw the surveillance camera footage at the property. The footage was central to Mr. Smith's investigation into whether Mr. Nauta, at Mr. Trump's request, had moved boxes in and out of a storage room at Mar-a-Lago to avoid complying with a federal subpoena for all classified documents in the former president's possession. Many of those movements were caught on the surveillance camera footage. I guess the real question is why they didn't turn that off before the move. I guess I'm surprised that they didn't think to do that. The revised indictment said that in late June of last year, shortly after the government demanded the surveillance footage as part of its inquiry, Mr. Trump called Mr. de Oliveira and they spoke for 24 minutes. It leaves a trail behind. You gotta be non-lazy. You gotta speak to people in person. You can't make this crime boss thing work from your bed, you know? Anyway, 2 days later, the indictment said Mr. Nauta and Mr. de Oliveira went to the security guard booth where the surveillance video is displayed on monitors, walked with a flashlight through the tunnel where the storage room was located. Flashlight, yes. Why not turn on the lights? I don't know. Maybe they thought they wouldn't be on camera if it was dark. And observed and pointed out surveillance cameras, which they should already know where they were. They're your cameras. I mean, it's not like you're casing the place. That's what they were doing. You shouldn't have to case the place. But anyway, a few days after that, Mr. de Oliveira went to see Mr. Taveras, who is identified in the indictment as Trump Employee 4, and took him to a small room known as an audio closet. I guess where all the audio equipment is. Anyway, there the indictment said the two men had a conversation that was meant to, quote, remain between the two of them. I don't know what was going on. Mar-a-Lago is a sex club. They literally went in the closet and said, this remains between the two of us. I don't know what happened, but apparently it was a conversation about deleting surveillance footage. And that's the best thing that they could have done in there. Anyway, it was then that Mr. de Oliveira told Mr. Taveras that the boss wanted the server deleted, the indictment said, referring to the computer server holding the security footage. Mr. Taveras objected. Wow, all right, and said he did not know. Oh, okay. He did not know how to delete the server and did not think he had the right to do so. There you go. The indictment said. At that point, the indictment said Mr. de Oliveira insisted again that the boss wanted the server deleted, asking, what are we going to do? Right? And it's interesting. I'd like to know how the inflection was on that. Well, the boss wants it deleted, so what are we going to do here? Think about it. I got you here alone in the closet. You know, I got what's the line from Clueless? I got a shovel and a 45 or something like that, right? I doubt anyone would miss you. I think that's the line. Anyway, 2 months later, after the FBI descended on Mar-a-Lago with a search warrant and hauled away about 100 classified documents, probably should have taken about 100 members with them, actually, people in Mr. Trump's orbit appeared to be concerned about Mr. de Oliveira's loyalties. Someone, we don't know who, right? This is a quote. Someone just wants to make sure Carlos is good, the indictment quoted Mr. Nauta as saying to another Trump employee. Because they're all bad. They want to make sure he's good, I guess. In response, the indictment said the employee told Mr. Nauta that Mr. de Oliveira was, quote, loyal and, quote, would not do anything to affect his relationship with Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump. All right. After the conversation, Mr. Trump, who during his 2016 presidential campaign often assailed his opponent Hillary Clinton for deleting material from her email server, called Mr. de Oliveira and said that he would get him a lawyer. Okay, every accusation is a confession. The revised indictment also charges Mr. de Oliveira with lying to federal investigators, because he was alive, he was alive and he was speaking, so probably lying. It recounts an exchange in which he repeatedly denied seeing or knowing anything about boxes of documents at Mar-a-Lago, even though the indictment said he had personally observed and helped move them when they arrived. So, you see what's going on here. Do you know anything about these boxes? Oh, I've never seen them even. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, you might be on video from the security cameras doing the exact opposite of that. That would be proving that you were a liar. Oh, I don't know anything about any surveillance video. Go delete the surveillance video. Okay, boss. And then they screw it up and can't do it right or refuse to do it or God knows what exactly goes into it. And then the feds get the video and they're like, well, here you are moving the boxes that you said you didn't know anything about. Don't you feel dumb now? He doesn't have to answer that question. Objection, right? Goes to, all right. Well, anyway, Mr. de Oliveira, his lawyer, rather, John Irving, declined to comment. He had a better idea about how to talk to the federal investigators than de Oliveira himself did. Anyway, or Nauta, for that matter. A statement attributed only to the Trump campaign called the new accusations a desperate and flailing attempt by the Justice Department to undercut Mr. Trump, the current frontrunner for the Republican nomination to take on President Biden next year, because nothing they love so much in the Republican Party as a filthy, pervert criminal like myself. Mr. Trump and Mr. Nauta have both pleaded not guilty. That's a weird plea because they're actually guilty, but they said they're not guilty. With respect to the charges in the original indictment, they'll probably do the same with this one too. Their case has been scheduled to go to trial in May. That's like almost a year from now, but that's when it's happening. The new charges lay out in detail efforts by Mr. Nauta to speak with Mr. de Oliveira about the security camera footage and to determine how long the footage was stored after the government sought to obtain it under a subpoena. In other words, how long is this stuff stored? Well, it's only stored for 10 days. Well, the crime was committed 11 days ago, so I guess we're okay. Versus, well, it's stored for 45 days, and damn, I just did that crime. We're going to have to delete something. They were trying to figure out the scope of their next crime. The indictment contains an additional charge related to a classified document, a battle plan related to attacking Iran that Mr. Trump showed during a meeting at his Bedminster Golf Club to two people helping his former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows write a book. The updated indictment provides specific dates during which Mr. Trump was in possession of the document, from January 20th, 2021, when we kicked his ass out of office. The day he left office is what it actually says. Through January 17th, 2022, the date Mr. Trump turned over 15 boxes of presidential material to the National Archives. The specificity of the dates indicates that prosecutors have the document in question. Okay. And the indictment describes it as a presentation concerning military activity in a foreign country, adding it was marked top secret. Okay. There was question about whether or not they had actually recovered that document, but I guess they're saying here that the paperwork indicates that they are now back in possession of it. Okay, I mean, I suppose that's a lucky break. The meeting at which Mr. Trump showed the document was captured in an audio recording, another dumb move, and Mr. Trump can be heard rustling paper and describing the document as secret and sensitive and indict me and convict me. Great. Anyway, still, he has tried to suggest that he never had a document in his hand and was simply blustering. There was no document, Mr. Trump claimed to the Fox News host Bret Baier in a recent interview. That was a massive amount of papers and everything else talking about Iran and other things, and it may have been held up or may not. But that was not a document. I didn't have a document per se. There was nothing to declassify. Oh my gosh, huge liar. Oh well. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm your host, David Waldman. I never do say things like that when we return because I'm always the host for one thing, and for another, I don't know. Seems too broadcast radio-ish for my tastes. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yes, we were talking about how the former commander-in-chief was stealing top-secret battle plans for the invasion of Iran and waving them around at people and trying to get them to, I don't know what, marvel at his amazing ability to steal stuff. I don't know what he thought he was trying to do. Anyway, I know in that specific instance he was trying to prove that General Milley was a liar about what? We sort of know. To who? Yeah, we sort of know also. It was really of no avail. But in his mind, that's like a big deal, big news. Okay. So now this indictment, the superseding indictment, reiterates. I guess it doesn't in the document, but we have other evidence of his denying that he even had a document. He's heard rustling the papers and saying, "Look what I have here in my hand. It's a document." about invading Iran. I didn't write it. General Milley did. This is proof of my case, which now usually when you say something like this is proof of my case, it's because you have something like written, some sort of really substantial hard evidence like a document. And then when you say, look what I have in my hand, it's a document, and you're taped saying that, I mean, I think the jury is kind of entitled to believe, even though he's a huge liar. I mean, that would be some interesting move to make. His defense lawyers say, sure, he says he has a document in his hands. Sure, he says this is the classified document the government says it is. But remember, this client of ours is a huge liar. So he was lying on that tape right in front of everybody. So the claim is that he's sitting there in a room with people with eyeballs and, able to see, not visually impaired in any way, as far as we know, and saying, look at this secret document. You shouldn't be looking at this secret document because it's secret and I shouldn't be showing it to you. But if you did look at it, you would see, and you are looking at it, you would see exactly what I'm talking about. And curiously enough, what I'm saying corresponds with all of this. And his claim is, no, it didn't. I was lying right in front of people who could see with their very eyes that I was lying. All right. Sure, that's the claim. Anyway, the original indictment filed by Mr. Smith and his team in June came about 2 months after local prosecutors in New York filed more than 30 felony charges against Mr. Trump in a case connected to a hush money payment made to a porn star, and we all know which one it was, in advance of the 2016 election. Mr. Trump remains under investigation by Mr. Smith's office over his wide-ranging efforts to retain power after his election loss in 2020, and how those efforts led to the January 6, 2021 assault on the Capitol by a pro-Trump mob. He is also being scrutinized for possible election interference by the district's attorney's office in Fulton County, Georgia. It's all, required information to disclose in case someone was reading this article all the way to the end and it was entirely novel to them. They would learn, oh yes, there are many other investigations going on. Now, out of curiosity, just to evaluate the claims of the headline writers over at The Hill, we will see whether they're the 5 revelations from the new Trump charges, a piece written by Zach Schoenfeld, lives up to the hype. I mean, it wasn't that much hype, but I hyped it more than they did, I guess. So let's go see now. Federal prosecutors' superseding indictment against former President Trump in his classified documents case on Thursday has brought to light several new charges and revelations. Trump now faces a total of 40 criminal counts in the case, 3 more than he did previously after prosecutors added allegations that Trump pushed to delete surveillance footage at Mar-a-Lago and willfully retained an additional sensitive document. Here are 5 revelations from the new court filing, and maybe just to save time in case it's really repetitive, we'll start by reading the top line section headlines. 1, Trump is accused of seeking to delete footage. We know that basic fact. I'm going to kind of skim and see if there's any new information that's different from the time, substantially different enough that we should read it, and I don't think so. Second one is prosecutors name a new co-defendant. That's Carlos de Oliveira, so we already got that information as well. I mean, it's the same reporting. I don't know. So they haven't parsed it like, I don't know. I was trying to give them credit. Like maybe they parsed things like Marcy did and teased something else out from the facts or the way the facts were presented. But not so far. Then the third thing, the boss wanted it done. That we heard too, but let me just see. No mention here of them meeting in the bushes either. That came from Marcy's thing. And I didn't even put Marcy's thing aside because as fascinating as they are, they make better background than reading on the air because of how involved and factually intense and self-referential in a good way that all of her writing is. She's always just, she leaves no links out. And she'll say, I remember 2 months ago I told you that this was the case. Anyway, let's see. The indictment went on to describe the efforts de Oliveira and Nauta took to organize their plans secretly. Apparently, there we are, walking among the bushes around the IT office where the security footage was managed. At another point, de Oliveira and Nauta purportedly, they walked with a flashlight through the tunnel and observed and pointed out security cameras. All right. I don't know why that couldn't have been done in the light, but it wasn't. Then Trump faces a new charge over the alleged Iran war plan presentation. I don't know whether the allegation is, in reference to whether or not that was an Iran war plan or whether or not he actually showed it or what, but okay. And lastly, prosecutors say new charges shouldn't affect the trial date. That's still scheduled for May 20th, to be specific. May 20th, 2024. Entirely possible that changes, but it does note the parties in this case have previously battled over the trial date, with Trump's lawyers seeking a more relaxed schedule. That's one way of putting it, because I think they were looking for an indefinite postponement. That's a relaxed schedule, all right. But remember, Judge Eileen Cannon, who was overseeing the case last week, rejected the former president's legal team's request to indefinitely delay the matter. But the schedule is months later than prosecutors' trial date request. Trump's legal team could attempt to bump back the trial date with various pretrial motions, a move that would push the trial closer to, or even after, the 2024 presidential election, which I guess is their top strategy. Let's see if we can push it past the election, see if we can get Trump elected, and then he can pardon himself. And then, now, why would you work for that as the lawyer? I don't know, but I guess, you're zealously advocating for your client's best self-interest, or the client's best interests. Anyway, you get the idea. All right, so nothing more really revealed there. I do feel like maybe this might be of some interest. Where did I see this one pointed out? Can't recall. But at any rate, via social media, I am sure, pointed to this piece with an interesting headline. It comes from the Maddow blog, which is usually written by Steve Bannon. Yes, there he is. Okay. He's got the byline in this one. Gops Van Orden. I know that's a confusing sounding thing, but there's a guy in Congress by the name of Derrick Van Orden. He is from Wisconsin. He is a Republican. He is no doubt there because of gerrymandering, because that's the way all Republicans in Wisconsin get their jobs. And apparently he's a super jerk and we hate his stupid guts. And there you go. That's the end of the story. Representative Derrick Van Orden is in trouble. He reportedly has been, I guess, caught berating the teenage Senate pages with a profane rant. These are Senate pages. He's in the House. They sometimes interact because when senators, they have business to transact with the House and they need to message things over, or they're collecting signatures on a delegation letter or something like that. They will often send the pages on the errand of either delivering things to the House side or specific offices or collecting the signatures, whatever. So it's not unusual that a Senate page would end up coming in contact with a House member. But what is unusual is for these teenage kids to be berated with profanity by members of the House. They may berate one another with profanity and may do so with impunity, for all I know. But here, this causes a problem. What's going on? Derrick Van Orden cursed at a group of high school-aged Senate pages this week, and the closer one looks at the details, the worse the incident appears. Now, we could leave things there. That's just the subheader. But as Steve puts it here, as he says, the closer we look, the worse the incident appears. So naturally, we'll want to look closer in order to make the incident appear worse, because that's the nature of what we do when it comes to bad things that Republicans do. What's the story? If you visit Capitol Hill, you might notice groups of teenagers in and around the Senate chamber. Same if you watch C-SPAN. They are part of the institution's PAGE program, and they're effectively interns. As the program's website explains, they deliver correspondence to members' offices, they help prepare the chamber for sessions, and they carry bills and amendments to the floor. It's the sort of thing that looks great on college applications. The House page system, I think, if I recall correctly, they used to have a parallel house page system, and they ended up dismantling and abandoning it. One, because you don't need it anymore, because AI chatbots can do everything. But, it was largely manual labor, and it was a good idea to have somebody else handling it, I guess. But the problem was that members of the House kept, molesting them in various ways. So they decided maybe we just shouldn't have. You can't gather 435 elected politicians in this country and then put them around teenagers, because somebody's going to put their hands down the kids' pants. That's just the nature of the people we elect to office these days, as it happens. I think most recently they would have been talking about Mark Foley and his proclivity for, again, leaving behind evidence of crimes by text messaging with teenage pages, asking them to measure their genitalia for him because national security, presumably. Anyway, so that's the state of the thing. It's interesting. The Senate, I guess they said, well, there's only 100 of them. A lot of them are too old to even, break into a trot, let's say. So it's an easy thing for the Senate pages to run away from the smaller number of older, frailer senators. Will keep the Senate thing. Besides which, it's the House keeps getting caught sticking their hands down the pants of the teenage pages, not the Senate. We know how to delete the footage for that, so they got to keep their pages. Anyway, they still put them in the line of fire by sending them over to the House. Anyway, please don't send me on errands to the House. They molest us over there. Oh, well, that's part of the job, kids. I don't know. They should have got rid of everything. Anyway, it's a shame that you can't have teenage kids working around, responsible, upstanding American citizens, allegedly, these days. But hey, that's the news for you. Okay. During downtime, Steve Bannon continues, as all that was my own garbage. During downtime, it's not uncommon to see pages taking a break in the Capitol Rotunda. What's far less routine, however, is for this to turn into a controversy. USA Today reported, and I guess they're the ones responsible for uncovering this fabulous story, freshman Republican United States Representative Derrick Van Orden yelled and cursed at a group of high school-aged Senate pages while giving a late-night tour of the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday. Van Orden, who represents Wisconsin's 3rd Congressional District. Does everybody hear that? 3rd Congressional District. I don't know whether that includes Waukesha County or not, but at any rate, it's crucial to somebody. 3rd Congressional District, if you live there, this is your jerk-ass congressman doing this. He called the pages, well, let's see. We got a bunch of letters and dashes here because it's USA Today. And, USA, so you can't be cursing all over the place. So let's see. Do I have some censorship? I got my censorship horn thing, but I don't have all the rest of my good ones in there, like the slide whistle and the cuckoo clock is in there, but that one is the longer version that's meant to show that the person who's talking is cuckoo. And he is, so, right. And Derrick Van Orden speaking here. He called the pages lazy and told them to get the up off the floor as the pages were lying on their backs in the Capitol Rotunda, taking pictures of the building's dome during their final week at work, according to Punch Bowl News. And just to be clear on that, that's Punch Bowl News, not Punch Bowl News. That'd be a different kind of news. But honestly, I would like to hear some news about freshman Republican United States Representative Derrick Van Orden being punched in the for having done this. So I guess he thought they were napping, even though apparently it was late night Wednesday that he was giving this tour. And they're keeping teenagers like this, at work at all hours in case anybody wants to molest them. So, you got to be around. But no one apparently had a molestation appointment with any of these kids. So they were lying down. You lazy, and get up off the floor. It's a reasonable explanation. Of course, you probably could take a picture of the rotunda floor standing and sort of bending over backwards. They're young. They're flexible. That's why the senators love to molest them so much. So anyway, It was their last week at work. And by the way, it's basically Derrick Van Orden's first week at work, and he's yelling at people already. Anyway, one of the kids had the presence of mind to write down what the GOP congressman said. I'm surprised that he even had to do that because they were all holding their phones. So I'm surprised there's no recording of it, but I guess he starts cursing at them and then they have to quick take out their phones and open it up and open the right app, and they miss the opportunity to tape it. But he wrote down what the congressman said, and the Hill obtained the partial transcript. According to the report, oh good, I get to get the horn out here again, Van Orden called the pages jackasses, we don't have to bleep that one, and pieces of and he told them he didn't give a who you are, because he's a congressman, and you should give, I guess, a who he is, but he doesn't give a who you are. Get it? All right. And, oh, this is interesting. He reportedly added, you are defiling the space by lying down and taking a picture of their, by the way, what does Derrick Van Orden have to say about January 6th rioters? One might like to know about that. They were smearing feces on the wall, breaking the windows, turning desks over, running around saying, hang Mike Pence. Those were just tourists. These are pages who are dressed, by the way, in jacket and tie while they're there. And they were taking pictures of the historic building, which was nearly destroyed by, his people, but they're defiling the space. Anyway, those who follow Wisconsin politics closely might find, those who follow Wisconsin politics closely might find they should get therapy. But anyway, they might also find these circumstances familiar. Why? The New Republic noted that in 2021, the then candidate, Van Orden, threatened a 17-year-old staff member at a local library, demanding to know who set up the Pride Month display of books. Van Orden went on to check out every book from the display because he wanted to prevent everybody else. He just checked out a whole bunch of gay and lesbian and bi and trans and how many people are left in the LGBTQ. All right. Well, anyway, he checked every one of them out. Not because he was interested in them, but he was going to prevent everyone else from seeing them because everyone knows those are the only copies in the world. That's pretty amazing. Yeah. This is terrible. We shouldn't have these on display. Sir, actually, you checked out every single one of these books. Oh, that was for a different reason. Okay. And he's also weirdly attracted to putting himself in the faces of teenagers and asserting his power and authority. So, I'd check his computer and maybe even his crawl space if I were you. But that would be, this is not an autocratic state. We have to have better evidence than just my saying, hey, he sounds weird and perverted and, maybe he should be checked into. You can't just go on my say-so, because I'd have them all arrested. So, well, by them all, I mean the Republican conference. Anyway, the teenage girl who he was berating before he was elected went home and told her parents that she no longer felt safe working at the library. So that's about the end of America. Thanks a lot, Derrick Van Orden. We now have it so that 17-year-old kids in their hometown are scared to work in their library. No one wants to work anymore because they're afraid of being berated in public by weirdo pervert congressmen. How do I know he's a pervert? I don't. But am I right? Probably. Like I said, my allegations plus a search warrant and you'll have the guy dead to rights. The problem is getting the search warrant. Anyway, 2 years later, it appears the Republican thought it'd be a good idea to bully minors again. Seems to have some sort of fetish about that. For his part, Van Orden hasn't made much of an effort to contest the allegations. I like berating teenagers. I love giving them problems, getting in their face and showing them who's boss. When the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel asked the freshman congressman about the incident, he said the Capitol Rotunda was used as a field hospital during the Civil War and also to smear feces in during January 6, 2020. Anyway, adding that he considers it terribly disrespectful to lay on the grave of a soldier that died fighting for freedom. Field hospital, of course, is one thing. A grave is not. He wasn't on a grave. To the extent that reality matters, Steve notices, no one is buried under the Capitol Rotunda, and there are no graves to lay on. He is an idiot. And by the way, parents' rights, etc. And don't you call the parents terrorists if, let's say, one of the parents of the Pages or that girl from the library were to, let's say, find Derrick Van Orden someplace during the recess where he was appearing in his official capacity and decked him, breaking, nose, jaw, knocking his teeth out, breaking an eye socket, what have you, and saying, that's for molesting children. I did it to save the children and parents' rights, and you need to respect that, and you can't have me arrested for it because I was merely a mama bear standing up for my children. I just, I have to believe that they wouldn't accept that as an excuse. Anyway, nevertheless, it's terribly unfortunate that a congressman thought it'd be appropriate to upbraid kids with a profane rant. The fact that the Wisconsin Republican hasn't apologized makes the story worse and just makes him a target for getting decked. If that were to happen, I would not have any regrets about it, and I couldn't tell you it would upset me a great deal. But let's not forget what else has made him famous. There's no chance of my forgetting it because I don't know what it is yet, but I'll read it. And I have a pretty good memory. I probably won't forget. As regular readers might recall, Van Orden also went to Capitol Hill on January 6th, 2021. So, we no longer have any question about what he has to say about the January 6th protesters. He was one. That's pretty remarkable. According to his version of events, he left when the pro-Trump mob became violent, because that would be disrespectful, of course. And he insisted that he did not enter the grounds of the Capitol itself. Why not? Don't you love America? Didn't you want to pay respects to the soldiers buried there? Can't believe it. What a communist you are. Anyway, he says he didn't enter the Capitol itself, though a Daily Beast report later called Van Orden's claims into question. Maybe I'd like to read that report. The congressman rejected the accuracy of the article, but that's okay because, F him, because he's a total F. So, USA Today report went on to quote Courtney Rice, the communications director for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, who said, wow, I'm shocked. Oh, this sounds like, she's being sarcastic here. I'm shocked that the man who was part of an insurrection sexually harassed women in the military. Oh, I didn't know about that one. And screamed at a teen librarian aide because of an LGBTQ plus, there's a plus in this one, display, would do something like this. Yeah. Rice was apparently referring to Van Orden's 2015 book in which he, oh my God, where am I? What planet is this? He wrote a book in 2015. One, the fact that he knows what a book is, amazing. Then he wrote one, even though he hates libraries. He wrote a book, and this is linked, I might have to look at this one too, in which he mentioned an instance when he, what am I reading? All right. Trigger warning for everybody eating breakfast, drinking hot beverages, drinking cold beverages. Put the beverages down. If you have an air sickness bag handy, you're flying and listening to the podcast. I don't know how this would be happening. Maybe in the future you're listening to a rerun. Get it ready. And all right. I've read it now. I've seen this. Okay. Why do you write this in your book? What kind of book is this? Thankfully, I mumbled that, so I didn't need my censoring horn at the time. But I gotta get those other sounds in the soundboard. Okay. Van Orden wrote a book in 2015 in which this is a quote, in which he mentioned an instance when he revealed a male lieutenant's enlarged scrotum to unsuspecting female officers in an apparent prank. They're unsuspecting that they suspected. See, don't worry about it. It's not as bad as it sounds. They suspected that his scrotum was of normal proportions. And so they were unsuspecting that it was enlarged, and they were aghast at the proportions that were actually, I don't know. I'm not certain. Obviously, the unsuspecting part was probably, we're military personnel and we're at work. There's probably not going to be any scrotums at all shown to us of any size. There's really no reason to suspect that would happen because part of the military is we're wearing clothes. And in fact, we're wearing all the same clothes. And the whole purpose of that is so that we don't have to see anybody's scrotum, whether it's enlarged or otherwise. And lastly, what are we doing looking at a lieutenant's scrotum? If you're going to show us a scrotum, make it a general, I guess. Make it worth our time. So there you go. And what a prank that is, too, right? How does that prank go? Like, I'll bet you think this guy's scrotum isn't enlarged. And it isn't. But let's look anyway. Ha! Fooled you, it's enlarged. That got you. Pranked you. April Fools. I don't know. I'm not certain what that was supposed to be. I mean, unless it was something. You know what? Never mind. I'm not going to imagine anymore. Van Orden represents a highly competitive congressional district. Can you imagine that? That means that about 50% of the people in that district would like to punch him in the face, even before finding out that he was molesting teenagers. In southwestern Wisconsin. No, he was molesting the teenagers elsewhere. Although he did molest that one in the library there. And I use that term molested advisedly. I'm just saying he bothered them. That's all. Anyway, I have a hunch his re-election campaign will be worth watching. Yes, and parts of it might even be enlarged and revealed to you in an apparent prank. I think I might have to look at that. Did I open that one too? No, the first one I opened was, what was it? This comes from the Daily Beast, but of course they're not going to tell me because I have to register to keep reading. But I wonder if I pocketed the thing and then went back. Sometimes their firewall doesn't work all that well. Yeah, there it is. GOP. GOP candidate bankrolled January 6th riot with campaign cash. How do you like that? So he was already running for Congress and he put some of his campaign money into sending people, including himself, to the Capitol on January 6th. We'll read that one afterwards. And then, of course, the story of the 2015 book, which I think I feel like I owe you a return to that one. That could be a major feature of the second hour of the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And I know that other news happened, and there's some also esoteric stuff that's maybe outside of the mainstream of political news. It's just sort of interesting and important in a cultural way that we might be able to sneak in for you on a Friday. But I want you to take a minute, breathe into a paper bag if that's what you need to do after hearing about his idea of military-style pranks. Oh, those military guys. Boy, always enlarging things. All right, welcome back now to the Derrick Van Orden show, apparently. We got a ways to go on this one. All right, where we left off, if you are still alive after hearing about the military prank, maybe you want to hear the rest of this stuff. So first, the more mild of the two stories, although it leads to more fascinating details about this total jerk-ass that has gone under the radar, amazingly, because what a figure. I would love to have known about this guy for the past 2 years and have been making fun of him regularly. Well, in the super secret version of the Daily Beast story, which is apparently, and sometimes it's a little iffy, when you read the pocket version, it says here that it was written by Roger Sollenberger. It's the sort of piece that he might be on. But anyway, I'm not certain about that. This comes from June 27th, 2021. GOP candidate bankrolled January 6th riot trip with campaign cash. And it's just what it sounds like. 2 months. Well, first of all, we learned that he ran for Congress in 2020 and lost, because he was a pervert and a weirdo. Now, how he won in 2022 as a pervert and a weirdo, I'm not sure, given it's a rather competitive district. But, I guess I want to look into who was his opponent in that. I mean, all right, anyway. 2 months after Republican congressional candidate Derrick Van Orden lost his 2020 race, he joined the Stop the Steal rioters on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol, and he paid for the trip with donor money left over from his failed campaign, which he probably should have spent trying to win his campaign. Anyway, now Van Orden is running again and has already scored major endorsements from senior GOP House leadership, including Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, now, of course, Speaker. who was basically making deals with the devil all along in order to get this job. Van Orden, and this explains why he's such a weirdo and pervert, I guess. A former Navy SEAL. So, you know, again, I mean, I have to apologize to all the Navy SEALs who aren't sicko perverts, but honestly, the program seems to be creating sickos and maybe perverts along with them too. I'm just thinking Eric Greitens, this jackass. That's 2 out of the whole Corps. So, you know, you got to paint with a broad brush. That's what they say, right? You're supposed to tar everyone and bad apples and all that. So anyway, I don't know. I mean, I guess if the vast majority of Navy SEALs aren't sicko perverts, maybe they ought to get together and decide to, let's say, beat the living out of guys like Greitens and Van Orden, and say, you're making it so that regular people are afraid to be in a room alone with a Navy SEAL. Like, they should be thrilled and they should be standing up and saluting and loving us and giving us discounts on Chevys for our service. But instead, they're afraid they're going to be brutalized, berated, raped, molested, whatever, because of guys like you. And, you know, you have to assume that a good number, probably a good portion of the time Navy SEALs are together, they're actually beating the shit out of each other anyway. So why not just throw that one in there for fun? I mean, he's old, he's retired. You know, knock his teeth down his throat and tell him to stop besmirching the SEAL name. And Greitens, too, while you're at it. Anyway, he's not as old. Van Orden, and former Navy SEAL and small-time actor. Yes, he's actually done some acting. That's correct. And it's also unacceptable what he does now. So I don't know, that sound effect was next to the acting one, so I decided to go along with it. Anyway, he's a small-time actor. Well, it says here, I'll continue with the sentence. He has previously acknowledged attending the January 6th rally, but you want to hear about the actor thing, but has repeatedly claimed he never entered the Capitol grounds. But then when he said so, he was merely acting. He was lying about that, but not lying. Acting. Right. He claimed he never entered the Capitol grounds. However, social media posts from the riots suggest that isn't true. Oh, here's another sound effect. Yeah. I haven't used that yeah one in a while either. And by the way, those of you in the know about that one, that sounds exactly like somebody. It sounds like Patrick Starfish, maybe, from SpongeBob SquarePants saying, yeah. Yeah, but it's actually a goat. Like, that's the noise that this goat makes. Some goats do the, you know, that kind of thing. Then there's that one, the screaming goat that sounds like it's screaming, Ed! or something like that. But another goat says, yeah. And actually, I just use it as though it was human. Anyway, this guy. So he's a small-time actor. That caused me to click on that link and find out what the hell that means. It brings me to his IMDb, Internet Movie Database page, and tells us, one thing. By the way, when we say, well, he's retired, so he's old, and you could punch him in the face now if you're a young SEAL. How old is he? Younger than me. So if you prefer, or, you know, I might even take one for the team. If you promise you're also going to punch Van Orden in the face, and it's just because he's old, then I'll take one too, but I'm not a Navy SEAL. But all right. Anyway, he's like a year younger than me, born September 15th, 1969, unless, of course, he's merely acting. And when he gives his age out, you know, actors, they're very vain. They might be lying about their age. The mini bio on him is the only way that we know what movies he's in. It says he's known for, which is not really true, but, you know, that's the terminology they use on IMDb. Known for, so basically, I guess he's in movies about, you know, well, I'll use Greg's expression on it.
That's bullshit.
Yes, right. The for BS, you know, movies about awesome Navy SEALs or something, or, you know, military-themed movies that are terrible, and so they hire ex-Navy SEALs because somebody's a consultant on there. Like, I know a buddy of mine who will dress up like a Navy SEAL and molest pages for you on camera. Okay, great. Let's get him in here. First movie, we got to click through to all these, is Act of Valor in 2012 what's act of valor? I mean, it got made, so there's that. Who's in it? Are there like stars who are known? Top cast. Here's an idea of what we're dealing with. The top cast listed are Alex Vidov, Veadov, Rosalind Sanchez, right? Yeah. Nestor Serrano, Rourke Denver, playing a real stretch, Lieutenant Rourke. I'm sorry. Anyway, these are the most ridiculous. I've never heard of anybody in this movie. And there's Derrick Van Orden as Senior Chief Otto. Whatever. So I guess it looks like it's kind of autobiographical in some way. Everybody's sort of playing themselves in this. Anyway, I don't know what the hell is the point of the movie. Sometimes there's a plot synopsis available. Storyline. Let's see. Do we dare? An unprecedented blend of real-life heroism and molesting teenage pages. And original filmmaking. Act of Valor stars a group of active-duty Navy SEALs, which is probably against a rule somewhere, in a powerful story of contemporary global anti-terrorism and page molestation. Inspired by true events of page molestation, the film combines stunning combat sequences, up-to-the-minute battlefield technology, and heart-pumping emotion for the ultimate action-adventure. It's so ultimate, nobody saw it. So, there you go. Is there any, by the way, are they making any mistakes in here? Yeah, they always list the goofs here. In the beginning, there are GPS coordinates for the Philippines. It says 30 degrees north on the super. Philippines, though, lie between 11 and 17 degrees north latitude. And they couldn't even get it right. By the way, there's an alternative version, not virgin. There are no virgins around these Navy SEALs, I guess. The international version was the patriotic tone of the film has been toned down for the international version, which is, of course, Chinese Communist Party propaganda. Just like Barbie, they ought to be locking Van Orden up and throwing away the key. Damn it. It's interesting. Let's see. Is there more detail on that? Do they use the 9- line in any way? I don't know. Anyway, the point is, one, the movie probably sucks, and two, they, when they want international dollars, they know they can't be so, rah, rah, America, so they tone it down, and then they probably come and scream about the Barbie movie being changed. Anyway, there's more movies that he was in. Act of Valor. He was also in a movie called Surviving the Wild, apparently. And, well, now there's a name that you know in it, but of course, once I tell you who starred in the movie, you'll have a better picture of how Derrick Van Orden got in it. There's only one name I recognize, and the name is John Voight. So, ultra-conservative now, weirdo, and he becomes, he probably produced the movie, and he hires losers like political aspirant and former Navy SEAL Derrick Van Orden. By the way, there's another interesting, there is another name in here that I recognize, but not for his screen acting, but possibly for a different kind of you know what. Oh, I almost pressed the button. So what's going on here? I got to check into this one. Yeah. That's unusual. There's a credit in this movie, Surviving the Wild, or In the Wild. I don't know. Surviving the Wild, a credit for Matt Bevin, I believe now former governor of Kentucky, because he's a Republican, was governor. He's listed here as governor of Kentucky 2015 to present, but that's an awful long time. And two, we were just talking about the other day that Kentucky has a Democratic governor now. But Matt Bevin, in a huge stretch, is likewise hired to play the governor. I don't know, maybe he's playing the governor of a different state in this one, but there you have it. So John Voight is in it, and I recognize him. Derrick Van Orden I now recognize, and he's in it too. And Matt Bevin, governor of Kentucky, playing a governor in this movie. So, well, Gee whiz, what can you do? All right. Do you want to know what that movie was about? And this is beginning to become a waste of time, but I don't know. Now he's got me all interested in what the hell's going on with this movie. But okay, let's get rid of that. Surviving the Wild, and then there's another one in 2015 called Azadah, Azadah. The premise here being, on the edge of war-torn Afghanistan, a special forces soldier battles over the fate of a failed suicide bomber he believes was coerced into action. Again, probably playing a bit part in this. Yeah, he's all the way down here, but he's playing a colonel, so above his position here. Colonel Webb. Anybody else in this movie that I recognize? No. No names, no political celebrities. Not even a whole lot of people that actually have headshots. So, sounds like another straight to video piece of garbage, or what we used to call straight to video, but now they don't even go to video. So, a bunch of war movies. To no one's surprise. That's exactly why you would think he was an actor. So, anyway, where were we with it? Oh, yeah, right. So, he's a pervert, and he's acted in some films. Not those kinds of films that would show that he's a pervert, but anyway. Where were we? Right. Van Orden, a former Navy SEAL and small-time actor, previously acknowledged attending the January 6th rally, says he didn't go in the Capitol, but social media posts suggest that that might not be true. A Facebook image from January 6th shows Van Orden standing on a wall on the Capitol grounds that was inside a restricted area. So, that's it. I know we all have to say, well, allegedly, it could have been photoshopped, but probably not. Anyway, the Daily Beast recreated the photo. That doesn't sound great. Why recreate? On Friday, and confirmed that Van Orden would have had to cross police barricades to reach that area. All right. As for Van Orden's, not the worst thing in the world. As for his campaign expenses surrounding January 6th, it's unclear how they relate to Van Orden's attendance. FEC regulations state that travel expenses must be directly related to the campaign. Van Orden, who wrote off roughly $4,000 in transportation and D.C. hotel costs around January 6th for him, his wife, Sarah Jane, she's listed in his IMDb bio, and a campaign staffer, so he brought a threesome for whatever reason to D.C., lost his race in November and didn't declare his 2022 candidacy until April. Jordan Leibowitz, communications director for the campaign finance watchdog Citizens for Ethics and Responsibility in Washington. It's actually Responsibility and Ethics because they've made it into CERW, CARO, as opposed to crew. Anyway, he questioned the legitimacy of the expenses, as I might. Campaign accounts are not personal slush funds. They must be used for campaign-related activities. Attempting to overthrow an election you just lost is not proper campaign activity, Leibowitz told the Daily Beast. If he did use his campaign to pay for travel for him and his staff to attend the rally turned insurrection and whatever else they did in the hotel, it would raise serious questions about his compliance with campaign finance laws. In an op-ed published the week after the attack on the Capitol, Van Orden, Navy SEAL, remember, attacking the Capitol, claimed he made the trip, quote, for meetings and to stand for the integrity of our electoral system, both as a citizen, for which he shouldn't be using the funds, and at the behest of my neighbors here in western Wisconsin, for which he also shouldn't be using the funds. He didn't specify the nature of those meetings and did not reply to the Daily Beast's questions about the trip. He should reply to the specific nature of those things because it's weird that he bought hotel rooms, possibly, for himself, his wife, and an unnamed campaign staffer when he's a little untrustworthy around teenage kids. If those were campaign-related meetings, he should say so. Well, of course they weren't. If this was a personal trip as a private citizen, that's another matter, in which case he would be in trouble for using that money. Van Orden's op-ed went on to call the riot, quote, one of the most tragic incidents in the history of our nation. At no time did I enter the grounds, let alone the building, he said. So at that point, it was still in fashion to say that January 6th was bad. I wonder if he's changed the tune since then. But that Facebook image posted at 5:15 p.m. on January 6th shows Van Orden clearly on the Capitol grounds. And in a Facebook Live video shared earlier that afternoon from the Washington Mall, one of the candidate's friends said he was heading to meet Van Orden, who, according to the friend, was, quote, on the wall, and had told him he, quote, got a great spot to watch. I got off the phone with Derrick Van Orden. He and a bunch of his frogman buddies are on the wall, the friend says in the video. He said they got a pretty good vantage point on the wall to the left side of the building, so that's where I'm aiming for. He said, come on up. We got a great spot to watch. So that's kind of where I'm shooting for. And thanks for telling us that twice. This is his Derrick Van Orden's good friend Johnny Two Times over here. Anyway, the video was posted around 2:15 p.m. when the attack was in full swing. At one point, the friend says, I can see people up on the steps. Apparently, last I heard, they were inside the building at the door of the Senate. So here is a ex-Navy SEAL with a bunch of other ex-Navy SEALs saying they're not going to enter the Capitol, but with a good vantage point to watch other people smash the windows of the United States Capitol and storm it. And these ex-SEALs feel no compulsion whatsoever to stop any of it. They just want to watch from a cool spot. In the end, however, Van Orden claimed he stood on the parapet that lines the perimeter of the grounds and watched what should have been an expression of free speech devolve into one of the most tragic incidents in the history of our nation, in which he did nothing to intervene. One of the most tragic incidents in the history of our nation. I'm a Navy SEAL. I'm here with a unit of Navy SEALs. Let's get some popcorn. He left, he said, because when it became clear that a protest had become a mob, fearing his presence could be construed as tacitly approving this unlawful conduct, not defending our nation or anything. He can't bring himself to get a crew of Navy SEALs to intercede on behalf of the United States Capitol. They just made popcorn and left, apparently, because of his courage. Van Orden's attendance at the Capitol puts him in league with the slew of political hopefuls who attended the insurrection and have since declared candidacies for office. What sets Van Orden apart, however, is his support from powerful House Republicans and his strong showing in last year's election. He lost by about 2.5 points to longtime incumbent Representative Ron Kind, who has held the seat since 1997. After the election, Van Orden questioned the vote count. Didn't say whether he ran against Ron Kind again in 2022. Maybe Ron Kind retired, possibly, and it was an open seat, and that's how he got in. Van Orden's 2022 bid has already drawn major endorsements. Major endorsements. Since April, he scored support from McCarthy, as well as House Minority Whip Steve Scalise, of course, and newly minted conference chair Elise Stefanik as well. McCarthy, Scalise, and Stefanik all objected to the election results, as did two Wisconsin Republican congressmen who have also endorsed Van Orden, Representatives Tom Tiffany and Scott Fitzgerald. And as you know, F. Scott Fitzgerald. That guy's a jerk. Anyway, the tight 2020 race, which Kind described as competitive since day one, also attracted a record amount of campaign contributions. Federal disclosures show Kind raised about $3 million. Van Orden pulled in almost $2 million, adding up to the district's largest haul in at least 20 years. The fight nearly drained both campaigns, and by the end of the year, Van Orden had about $12,500 left. He spent about a third of that on a trip to what would become the Capitol riot. Interesting enough, but as you know, there's more about Van Orden. Now, I guess it's time for us to take a look at this piece from USA Today, making its second appearance in today's show, this time from September 25th, 2020. So we're talking about in the heat of the 2020 campaign, Van Orden's first run for Congress. So the reason I keep saying he's old, though, is he's got a very old look. He's got a gray beard and is kind of balding. But like I said, he's a year younger than me. But he's been doing some hard living, apparently. Anyway, in a book on, quote, the lost art of manhood, congressional candidate tells of exposing man's genitals to female officers. Molly Beck had the pleasure of reporting this actually for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and it's getting reprinted here in USA Today because that's what's going on in the USA Today. Good stand-up, valorous veterans are decrying the lost art of manhood, and apparently, what that means is the people have, I guess, female officers in the United States military have lost their ability to view various parts of manhood during the course of their normal work days. And Derrick Van Orden wants to, you may remember his 2020 campaign slogan, putting the enlarged scrotums back in the daily workday of the United States military for female officers. It was long and a very difficult thing to put on a bumper sticker. That may have accounted for his loss. The yard signs were terrible. But that's, I guess, what's going on. Oh, look, they're going to tell me I'm blocked because I'm not a subscriber to USA Today, of all things. Wasn't this the thing you could get for free back in the day by staying in the right hotel, and they sold to you for 50 cents at McDonald's? They are now telling me I can't read. You're telling me I can't read this story about scrotum exposure in the United States military? Well, we'll see about that. Can I get around it with Pocket? Let's see how strong the security is over at USA Today. No, that's interesting. They actually cut me off there too. So good job to the IT people but I can actually see just a wee bit, more what they gray out at USA Today. I can read you this. A retired Navy SEAL challenging a longtime Democratic congressman in western Wisconsin bragged in a 2015 book about revealing a male lieutenant's enlarged scrotum to unsuspecting female officers. Derrick Van Orden, a Republican from Hager City, running for a seat in the 3rd Congressional District, wrote about the incident in Book of Man, a Navy SEAL's Guide to the Lost Art of Manhood. So there you go. Apparently, I'm just saying that his idea of manhood is he runs into a bunch of female officers. Now, I would say most people would guess, without any further information, there's no reason to doubt that Derrick Van Orden had his own scrotum. But what he thought would be the best prank would be if he produced some other male officer's scrotum for viewing by the female officers. So I don't know exactly what he did to get it out, and it may be that he coaxed him into it. I'm just saying that Derrick Van Orden either spent his time saying, hey, why don't you take out your scrotum? Not for me, but as a prank on the ladies over here. Or he unzipped the guy's pants and took it out himself. I don't really know. Later on, all we know is he used extra campaign cash to buy hotel accommodations for his wife and a favorite campaign staffer, for some reason, in Washington, D.C. after his election was over and he had lost and he needed to go to the Capitol and protest, and then they all had a nice hotel stay together, and who knows what happened or whose scrotum went where. Anyway, this guy sounds like a super loser, and I'm pleased to have spent this much time making you aware of just what a scumbag he is and how he has to go. And again, a call to Navy SEALs, upstanding Navy SEALs of all kinds. Eric Greitens and Derrick Van Orden are making you all look like a bunch of filthy sicko perverts, and you'd be better off for your reputation if you knocked the living crap out of them at some point in the near future. I'm just saying, but I don't actually expect my opinion to change much because they're probably just not going to do it. So, I mean, again, you're talking about a group of guys who, in this instance, gathered as former Navy SEALs in close proximity to the Capitol on January 6th, claim in their op-eds to have been witnessing a true tragedy, one of the worst in the history of the country, that they had enlisted to serve, and said, there are a bunch of unruly idiots doing serious damage to our national democratic institutions, and we, who were formerly, anyway, sworn to defend them, are going to find a good place from which to watch. Well, thanks again, Super Patriots, and keep your scrotums to yourselves. All right, there's more in Pocket after this, but we're coming up to the break again. So let's see, anything that we can squeeze in, and I'm not talking about what people were squeezing when they're around Derrick Van Orden before the break. Well, probably not. Let's see, though. I got my plan coming up for afterwards. Maybe we get out of the direct politics. This is an interesting thing, though. Maybe we'll start in on this one because why not kick Ron DeSantis when he's down? Why not kick Ron DeSantis when he's up? Honestly, there's no reason not to be kicking Ron DeSantis, and no reason to stop kicking him now. This is an interesting angle on why he's a weirdo and a super jerk that I haven't seen discussed before. It's in Slate magazine. Molly Olmstead, was that not the reporter that what was the name of the reporter? No, Molly Beck, the other Molly. There's about 35 of them. But Molly Olmstead has written this piece in Slate. Will anyone buy Ron DeSantis's religious muddle? It's not an object that he has for sale on eBay. It's, I guess the muddle is about what exactly is his religion. And long story short, here's the subheader. The candidate is Roman Catholic, as you might have guessed, but his spiritual warfare language is trying to convince voters otherwise. Apparently, of course, like Donald Trump, he wants to co-opt the right-wing evangelicals, white evangelicals, as a voting base, and that means, for whatever reason, either denying or muddling how Catholic he actually is.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Let's finish up the day and the week, and let's read this piece in Slate magazine about will anyone buy Ron DeSantis' religious muddle? Let's see what's going on. When Ron DeSantis strode onto the stage in Smurf boots and an ill-fitting suit in April in front of almost 10,000 students at Liberty University. Was it required? How did they get 10,000 of them to get there? He did so with an introduction from the school's chancellor, Pastor Jonathan Falwell. Everyone who works there is a Falwell, I guess. Son of legendary televangelist Jerry Falwell. Was this in April? Was that because the other Falwell had been kicked out because he too was a weirdo perv? And now Jonathan is it devolves to Jonathan, I guess. Anyway, the chancellor noted that the university took pride in inviting speakers, quote, who have brought wisdom to this idea of what it means to be a champion for Christ. Word salad, if I ever heard it. DeSantis took the opportunity to paraphrase Jesus' words, because Jesus didn't do a good enough job, in the book of John, when he promised believers that they would be rewarded if they followed him. Yes, the truth shall set you free, DeSantis said, because woke represents a war on truth. We must wage a war on woke. And there was nothing Jesus loved better than waging a good war, especially on people who were awake. Anyway, it was an evangelical performance in a deeply evangelical setting. Anyone watching it might have assumed DeSantis was at home among evangelicals, but here's the thing, he's not one himself. Which, presumably, if there were normal people, and maybe just they're not, you can be at home among evangelicals without being one. They don't eat people who aren't evangelical, right? But, you might not understand their language because they're such word salad aficionados. But anyway, it doesn't matter. He's not one himself, and that's supposed to mean that he shouldn't have felt so comfortable speaking to them in evangelical terms. Ron DeSantis is solidly Roman Catholic, and that's fine. And I Nothing wrong with that, right? So, well, evangelicals think there is. So, though they ally themselves with Catholics all the time in pursuit of their anti-abortion agenda, that's the capacity in which they most love their Catholics. A recent descendant of Italian immigrants, it's not that recent, he was probably born 40 plus years ago, but you get the idea. DeSantis counts a Catholic priest as an uncle and a nun as an aunt. I mean, okay. He grew up going to Catholic school and attended Catholic Mass every Sunday. And yet, until recently, many people weren't sure whether he is still a practicing Catholic. Okay. When the Catholic magazine America, that's a Catholic magazine, okay, reached out to his press team to clarify his religious denomination, for example, they got no response. Given that DeSantis makes faith integral to his political identity, it became confusing enough that the Orlando Sentinel published a story with this reveal. After months of dodging the question, DeSantis' staff and a priest have confirmed that DeSantis and his family regularly attend the handful of Catholic churches in the Tallahassee area. Okay. That's interesting. Well, one, you shouldn't really have to answer questions like that. I mean, honestly, I would dodge the question for months. Well, maybe I wouldn't dodge the question for months, but I can understand somebody dodging the question. It's your right to dodge that question if you don't want to answer it. You're not supposed to have any religious tests. But if you're super proud of your religious practice, then you'd think you would answer. But he just doesn't like answering the press about anything. But this was an invitation for him to talk about his faith. Why didn't he take it? I don't know. And I guess what I think is happening here is he thought that there was some security risk in telling people what church he attends. Like, where am I every Sunday? Why it occurs to him immediately that people might want to, attack him. I don't know. But anyway, okay. Legitimate maybe security concern. And then maybe he was like, well, why don't we just say, I love all the Catholics and I go to lots of different, also if you tell them which church you go to, you can say, oh, this one is Opus Dei and it's really weird and they do Latin Mass and it'll turn people off or whatever. Might turn off evangelicals, quite honestly. So he wants to be able to say he goes regularly to, 5 or 10 different Catholic churches in the Tallahassee area. But let's say he wants to say that, but he really doesn't go to very many of them or has never been to anyone but the one he goes to. And he asks, it says here, what is this? After months of dodging the question, DeSantis staff and a priest have confirmed that he regularly attends at a handful of churches. The priest may have said, unless I see you actually at these other churches, I'm not going to confirm it. So they spent the next couple of months that they were supposedly dodging the question, going to services at 5 or 6 different churches around the area. So then the priest would then feel comfortable saying, yeah, he has regularly attended a handful of Catholic churches in the Tallahassee area. That's my guess. If there's an explanation at all. Could just be a lying priest that just wanted to help him out. Anyway, so what exactly is DeSantis doing here? Why was his Roman Catholicism essentially a secret? Wasn't, really. Faith can be no private matter for a Republican presidential candidate. That's true. It's a problem of their own making. As Politico and others have noted recently, DeSantis' presidential campaign has outlined educated white evangelicals as being his gateway to the nomination. So, is this Catholic evangelical two-step that he's trying to court voters? And if so, is it a good strategy? What exactly is Ron DeSantis signaling to Republicans with how he represents or presents his faith? DeSantis has made it clear that Catholicism is not central to his image. Unlike President Joe Biden, who is known to pray the rosary and identifies profoundly as Catholic, DeSantis keeps things generically Christian. Even the prominent Catholic masses that he has attended could be justified by non-Catholics as political in nature. One at the culture war-infused Ave Maria University, and one at a blue mass for police officers who died while on duty. His fight against abortion certainly taps into a traditionally Catholic battle, but it's a battle that Protestants co-opted decades ago. When he speaks of his faith in interviews, he speaks of faith, not the church's teachings or anything more distinctly Catholic in flavor. If this choice is a matter of identifying as or appealing to a generic white Christian America, it doesn't sound that different from his recent efforts to pronounce his own name in a less European way. Oh, that's interesting. That's linked. What's the story here? Is Ron DeSantis forgetting the way his wife wants him to pronounce his name? I don't know. Molly Olmstead writing this story back in early June of this year. An odd thing about Ron DeSantis, he doesn't seem to have a consistent way to pronounce his own name. This is something Florida reporters have been tracking for at least a few years now, but this week national reporters, especially Axios, which tracked the inconsistencies between his use of DeSantis versus DeSantis, really seemed to take note. And the reporting generated a bit of a news cycle by catching the attention of the former president of the United States. So, have you heard that Rob DeSanctimonious, wants to change his name again? Donald Trump wrote recently on Truth Social in one of 19 posts he shared about DeSantis. So, I guess you say DeSantis. Ron DeSantis versus Ron DeSantis. I don't know. Is that less? All right. It's less right anyway, but I don't know which one his wife wants. I guess she wants the DeSantis. Anyway, but from the way he speaks at events and in interviews, it does seem that DeSantis isn't just trying to seem less Catholic. It sounds like he's also trying to seem more evangelical, or at least one specific kind of evangelical. In speeches, DeSantis has a favorite line. It is time for us to, quote, put on the full armor of God. He's used it in reference to resisting COVID lockdowns or enacting abortion bans or just standing up against leftists. This is a reference to Ephesians in a passage about Christians staying committed to their faith, but DeSantis uses it in reference to opposing enemies. It's a term now commonly used in allusion to spiritual warfare, popular among evangelicals who feel the call to win over the country. There are other ways that he takes on this spiritual warfare language, as when he ran an ad alluding to Paul Harvey's "So God Made Me a Farmer" speech, implying that he had been sent by God to be a fighter, not a farmer. It's a religious tone that fits the candidate's culture war sensibilities. God made me a farmer. This is a long article. Maybe we stop at this point, but I don't know. Well, I'm getting intrigued. This messaging has received mixed reviews from religious experts. Some view DeSantis' language as plainly antithetical to his Catholicism, but others believe it's reflective of how some modern American Catholics have embraced a more aggressive us-against-them Christianity. That's too bad. It's a tone that David DeCossey, the religious and Catholic ethics director at Santa Clara University's Marcula Center for Applied Ethics, said is not very Catholic. Of course, it's not possible to say it's inherently incompatible with Catholicism, but there is definitely a tension of stark division of good and bad, Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and the left. At some point, that simply does not work with Catholicism. As he explained it, modern Catholic theology insists on the dignity of all people and that no one is beyond redemption. What you can hear in this stark binary language on the part of DeSantis is that fill in the blank. The liberals, the left, the Democrats have become inherently evil in some way, he said. You're moving out of that Catholic sense of the world and moving into something maybe evangelical, maybe Manichaean. Still, even if DeSantis strays from official church teachings, there are many Catholics with deeply cynical black and white views of the world, and there are some embracing the ideas of spiritual warfare. This trend has emerged from different traditions within the church, but for DeSantis specifically, it comes from the sort of masculine Christianity that emerged first in the 1990s among Protestants. Overall, it 100% makes sense from a Catholic perspective, says Lauren Horn Griffin, a professor in the Philosophy and Religious Studies Department at Louisiana State University. There's a real prevalence of military metaphors in Catholicism. She cited the Knights of Columbus, a popular Catholic men's organization. Really? I wouldn't Anyway, night imagery, crusader imagery are very common, and that often leads to spiritual warfare language. So I think there's definitely a spiritual warfare rhetoric in the Catholic past and present. It's an interesting theological debate. More than any dogma, DeSantis' spiritual warfare language was likely inspired by geography, as his Catholicism is informed through interaction with the evangelicals around him. There's certainly a Southern vibe, Griffin said. It's a Southern way of talking about it, which Catholics don't share as much. In this light, in how he talks about religion, DeSantis is signaling where his cultural loyalties lie rather than his deeply held beliefs. But there was one moment in which DeSantis clearly affirmed himself as either directly speaking to or identifying with evangelicals. In an interview with the conservative evangelical Christian Broadcasting Network, the station's political analyst David Brody asked DeSantis to describe where he is today with his Roman Catholicism. And just adding Roman is really something. But anyway, DeSantis gave a bland, wandering answer about raising his children in a Christ-centered household and with those values, avoiding their indoctrination and wanting to bring the Bible alive for them. But when Brody pressed about his theology, DeSantis gave a decidedly un-Catholic answer. Brody asking, from the Roman Catholicism standpoint, there's a lot of tradition, there's a lot of rituals. That's kind of how it's steeped in. Evangelicals kind of see it as that born-again relationship with Jesus. How do you process that? And he answers, well, I mean, if you think about what's the most compelling part of the Bible, there's a lot for me. I would point out, I am the way, the truth, and the life, from John chapter 14, verse 6. I mean, that's ultimately what the faith centers around. Yes, there's a lot of traditions, and I think a lot of those are nice. But at the end of the day, it's where is your heart with respect to God, and what is that relationship? That, to us, to my wife and I, is kind of where we center that, and some of the history, I think, is really neat. But in terms of how we do it, we really just focus on what is the cornerstone of being a Christian in the modern world. And I think that it's really back to that in John 14:6. That is kind of vague. Not only did DeSantis call Catholic traditions a tepid nice and Catholic history really neat, he gave such a Protestant-sounding answer that Brody had to follow up with another clarification. You consider yourself Roman Catholic today, still? Yep, DeSantis said. As Brody would write on Twitter afterwards, his answer about having a personal relationship with God was fascinating, considering you typically don't get that type of answer in language among traditional Roman Catholics. Sacramentalism is not simply nice, said William D. Dinges, I don't know, Dinges, a religious studies professor at Catholic University of America, about the Catholic rites. They're constituent for what it means to be a church. Catholicism is not a me and Jesus form of religiosity. It's profoundly communal in the sense of our relationship with Christ and the church. From my point of view, he's talking more Protestant evangelical than Catholic. We can't say whether DeSantis really leans this way in his heart, or if he's playing up his Protestant-esque personal relationship with God for purely political reasons. We have evidence, though, that he doesn't care about reaching out to Catholic voters, partly because Catholics do not vote as a bloc. They're split nearly 50-50 among the two parties and tend to vote more among racial, ethnic, and class lines. Repeatedly, Catholic bishops have chastised DeSantis for his positions on the death penalty and on immigration. But DeSantis has shown no sign of moderation or remorse at the bishop's criticism. And we have evidence he's trying hard for the evangelical vote. This week, he announced his candidacy, he chose to speak to the largely evangelical audience at the National Religious Broadcasters Annual Convention, and his focus on Israel, alongside his acknowledgement that his Israel position has to do with the Bible, is clearly connected to evangelical priorities, given that Catholics do not share in certain evangelical theological views about the nation. So, DeSantis' religious messaging leaves him in a strange spot. While Donald Trump barely makes an effort to pretend to be religious, no one confuses him for a religious man. DeSantis is trying to brand himself as a credible, vaguely evangelical Christian. But that's a crowded lane beside fellow candidates Mike Pence and Tim Scott, who have for decades proved themselves to be authentic, committed evangelicals. With those uncut options, how many educated white evangelicals will really go for the less pure version? Neither fully Catholic nor fully evangelical, DeSantis is counting on voters to care enough about religious authenticity to defect from the religiously illiterate Trump, while not caring enough to think too hard about whether he's an actual authentic evangelical candidate. All right, interesting background. I mean, we don't put too much emphasis on candidate religion normally, but when they make it an issue, I guess it's open to question, and Slate has pushed through that door, and, well, that's where they are. Okay, let's see. Other things that we haven't mentioned or discussed this week, and you have no doubt been reading about and discussing on your own. I want to at least acknowledge one, what's going down in Texas, where the Justice Department is now having to sue the state of Texas for installing like a floating barrier and some razor wire all over the Rio Grande, just being exceptionally cruel about things. And apparently it's caused grave injury and death in certain cases as well. The state of Texas, of course, has no right whatsoever to impede a waterway like that. That's the exclusive province of the federal government. So from a legal standpoint, constitutional standpoint, the federal government is 100% right, and that barrier should come out. But of course, Texas is saying, make us do it, because they haven't read the Constitution and they don't like learning what the state of the law is ahead of time. They want to be forced to do everything. So I want to sort of acknowledge that issue, even though we haven't spent any time on it. And, until, I guess, the case gets closer to resolution in court, we probably won't be talking about it again. But also acknowledge the reporting over the last couple of days of special interest to me, because I keep tracking all of the COVID numbers nightly, even as fewer and fewer states are even bothering with reporting their COVID numbers. But one of the easy to see narratives, and finally now has been seen and described by more scientific parsing of the evidence than I compile. But there's a piece, for instance, that I put aside from the New York Times, the steep cost of Ron DeSantis' vaccine turnabout. But it's not just Florida. It's a number of Republican states in which the governors fought back against vaccine mandates, mask mandates, or even began insisting that COVID itself was not all that dangerous or posed no danger to children, et cetera, et cetera. And now, as it turns out, the costs, the death toll, the number of those suffering long-term debilitating illness because of their bout with COVID, much higher in Florida and other red states with performatively red governors than it is in any of the blue states, even though you may recall that for the first year plus of the pandemic, the numbers were entirely in reverse. And it, of course, the initial numbers led Donald Trump and Jared Kushner alike to treat their response, to temper their response to COVID in political terms. It's a blue state problem. Blue state voters are the ones who are going to be getting sick and dying from COVID. We should let that happen so that we can win the election more easily. I mean, one of the more disgusting calculations ever made. Meanwhile, it led the governors to do the same and kill many, many more of the people in their states than would have been the case otherwise, and no one is ever going to be held to account for any of that. But we're appreciative of the reporting so that we can at least hold them accountable at the ballot box, to the extent that anybody will still cast a vote on that basis. I don't know. Very interesting. Certainly worth reading, and I will include it in the roundup so that you can read the article if you have not. But it strikes me as the kind of thing that you would have discovered and read on your own, probably during the vacation week as well, when most of this stuff happened. Let's see. A couple of other things. Maybe we'll throw this one in there. I was going to go in a non-political, cultural direction, and I'll tip you off as to what I was going to read. A piece from NPR about the Hollywood strike. The streaming model, it says, is cratering, and here's how that's hurting actors, writers, and fans. That will be of interest to many of you, I'm sure, though it's not political in nature straight up, though everything's political ultimately, but I thought that would make for a great explanation of what's going on behind the strike. But I think the strike will probably still be going on, and we could read that at some later date. Instead, perhaps we go a little earlier back in time and to things that I had collected a while ago, sometimes I think in many cases during the break. But let's share this one. Maybe we can get the most of it in before we wind up for the day. Revisiting a theme that I think we've mentioned before. I don't know exactly when, but I know we have called this phenomenon out in the past. Now I see more reporting on it again from NPR. Odette Youssef is the writer on this piece. Active club hate groups are growing in the U.S. and making themselves seen. I wanted to bring that back to everyone's attention because, well, read the headline. Do you remember the active club situation? In late May, a group of young people, male neo-Nazis, as it turns out, converged outside a bookstore in Bozeman, Montana. Why? Of course, to protest a drag queen story hour, when they really should be protesting former Navy SEALs in the United States Congress who are molesting teenage pages and library assistants instead. But the drag queens, that's approved among their group. That's who we should be harassing. Later that day, they hit a similar event in Livingston, Montana. Who knew that there were so many drag queen story hours going on in Montana? As it turns out, it's maybe a widely popular kind of event, even in Montana. Anyway, the second weekend in June, the groups targeted the Lewis County Pride Festival in Centralia, Washington. A week after that, it was the Wind River Pride event in Lander, Wyoming. And the following weekend, they were at Oregon City Pride, not far from Portland, Oregon. So, world travelers they are. These men, this active club, dressed in tactical gear and masks, because tactical is cool, were members of so-called active clubs, a term that may be relatively new to American audiences. They are a strand of the white nationalist movement that has grown quickly during the last 3 years and that has recently taken their message of hate into more public view. These decentralized cells emphasize mixed martial arts training to ready their members for violence against their perceived enemies. They practice punching one another so that they feel more at home being punched and punching back when they incite violence the best they can at some of these events, although very often people just don't take the bait. So anyway, Stephen Pigott, a researcher with the Western States Center, a national civil rights organization, has closely tracked their evolution in the Pacific Northwest. They are really focused on a couple of things, said Pigott. One is centering, organizing, and trying to recruit people through combat sports, but also preparing for political and racially motivated violence. Here again, it is really something of a bit of evil genius on their part. There's a huge popularity of mixed martial arts. They, I'm sure, are banking on the very real possibility that they could bring people in just for the mixed martial arts training and then say, well, now that you've gotten to know us a little bit and you were friendly with us, we'll start broaching some political subjects and try and see if we can indoctrinate you with our political views. And also teach you, well, now that you know how to fight and you're not afraid to punch and be punched, why not go to some of these events and punch and be punched, right? Practice your training and intimidate the other side into submission. Like if we're willing to go to a protest, it's one thing if we go to a protest and there are counter-protesters there. But if we're beating them physically and they start becoming afraid to show up, we'll quote-unquote win. What a great strategy. Why not do that, right? So, those that protested the LGBTQ gatherings in the Pacific Northwest states call themselves the Northwest Nationalist Network. Not KKK, but NNN, I guess. They have been among the most emboldened to bring their activities into the streets, but groups in Arizona, California, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee have also been notably active, and recently 2 new networks have been announced. Yay, new network. The Dixie Alliance for groups in the southern states and the Midwest Network. These clubs are decentralized and they're forming on their own, said Morgan Moon, an investigative researcher at the Anti-Defamation League, which estimates that there are active clubs in now at least 30 states, We're starting to see the active club model pop up in Europe, as well as in Canada now. Just by way of background, we'll add this bit here. European hooliganism for American neo-Nazis. That is to say, those who have tracked closely the active club scene in the U.S. largely attribute its establishment and growth to a single individual, Robert Rundo. I think he did get mentioned when we read about this before. Rundo, a self-professed fascist and white nationalist who frequently traffics in anti-Semitic tropes, has spent much of the last 5 years on the run from law enforcement. In the spring, he was arrested in Romania, like where they arrested Andrew Tate, right? And a court recently ordered that he be extradited to face charges in California for rioting and conspiring to riot at political rallies. What Rundo did was take a model of European far-right extremism, decentralized and, quite honestly, borrowing, if not stealing from, far-right football hooliganism subcultures right down to aesthetics, and plopping that down into an American context is something new and innovative, said Michael Colborne. Sorry, there we go. Not Michael Corleone or anything like that. Michael Colborne, a researcher, investigator, and journalist at the investigative journalism website Bellingcat. We all know them. Colborne's investigations helped to uncover Rundo's whereabouts in Serbia in 2020 and 2021, and then in Bulgaria in 2022. He's going to be a hard guy to track down if he's moving around like that. Rundo's alleged criminal activity in the U.S. dates back chiefly to 2017 and 18, when he ran an active club in Southern California called the Rise Above Movement. We remember them, the RAM, with all their shirtless photos with one another and calling each other Rams, and who knows what that meant. Despite that crew's dissolution and his absence from the U.S. during the last several years, Colborne says Rundo has retained a central role in the growth of the active club scene. He sells merchandise online and uses podcasts to instruct others on starting their own crews. Colborne said Rundo's advice to adherents centers on what he calls the 3 F's. And one of them isn't even what you would think. Fashion, fitness, and fighting. He really saw the power of that aesthetic, that power of bringing young men together into these hyper-masculine subcultures where they could train up for physical combat against their perceived ideological foes, said Colborne. Watch out, kids. Before you know it, you'll be exposing enlarged scrotums to female officers in the Navy SEALs. I don't know. These sort of things kind of overlap, but anyway, just wanted to put that back on your radar for a Friday afternoon.
From NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, time now for Justice Putnam in the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Of course, he'll be covering the new superseding indictment as well. But also, Texas shutting down libraries in the blackest school districts in the state and turning them into child prisons. And misleading women on abortion could cost Illinois crisis pregnancy centers big bucks. Stay tuned and find out how.